Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here today. We appreciate it. We've been honored with the presence of Senator John Cullerton, the President of the Illinois State Senate. He has a lot of issues that's on his plate today and always. And we just welcome him to the university. And John, it's yours.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. President. I really enjoy coming down here to Carbondale. We had a great day visiting with our newspapers, over to the law school, and got a chance to go visit a program which is funded by the state dealing with the treatment of autism, and it was very helpful in light of the fact that we're in Springfield, we're dealing with a really tough budget, and so this is a program which is being funded by the state, as is obviously the university, and so it's important to come down and talk to people who are beneficiaries of our work in Springfield. And always got a nice warm reception, nice warm weather, and really appreciate the fact that people down here are much more attuned to the issues of state government. The questions even at the law school are very, very intelligent, and really appreciate the opportunity to be here. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
One of the things SIU is facing right now is the seemingly inevitable move to performance-based funding. How do you feel about that taking over for state universities?
Well, it's a good thing for the entire state. We have tough times. We have to make sure that we're spending our money wisely, and it's important to ask questions about whether the money we're spending is going in the right fashion. You know, there could be programs that were started years ago by individual legislators or individual people who had a cause, and we just keep on funding them every year without, you know, questioning whether or not there's a need for them. In fact, at the rehabilitation center that we just went to on this grant for autism, they're all prepared to talk about the outcomes that they are bringing about, and that's what we need to do. We should re-examine all of these things. You shouldn't just be, you know, budgeting for costs. You shouldn't just say, okay, we spent this much money last year, let's cut it by 1% or 10%. You have to find out whether you need to spend the money at all, and that's what we're doing. And we have to do that because, in our opinion, we have to cut at least $1 billion out of the governor's budget. In spite of the fact that we had an income tax increase, we still need to cut, and that's what we're going to be doing. And so that's why I think it's a good program.
I think the suggestion would be that the people who know best about budgeting for a university are at the university. So how do you strike a balance between leaving it up to the legislature to determine what's a good performance or not?
Well, the universities are treated differently, and they probably would continue to be treated differently. The monies that universities collect for tuition are not something which the legislature in the past has, you know, appropriated on a line item basis. We want to make sure, of course, that the money that the universities, all the universities, collect are being spent wisely, especially in light of the fact that we have such pressure to make cuts. But we do, in the area of higher ed, we do tend to say, okay, here's the amount of money we have for you. In many cases, I don't know what the percentage is here, Mr. President, but I know, for example, at the U of I think we only provide about a quarter of their total budget. And it's been on the decline. So we have, as adjusted for inflation, the state has not been giving as much money to higher ed as we did 10 years ago. And as a result, that's where the pressure is to raise the tuition. And it's something which we have to be very careful about. If we're going to get to the point where we're like a private university, we're going to discourage people from getting an education. So that's why we have to be responsible in Springfield and not, you know, cut it so much that they get away from their mission.
As far as funding, do you think that there should be a set style of funding for all universities, or just based on individual performance? I mean, like, every university has a, different, I guess, ideas for success. Would it be based on that, or would it just be set for all?
Well, I think that the performance-based budget is primarily aimed at programs, specific programs that the state has funded in the past. We just want to make sure that it's not the core state services. There are things like the program we just looked at. We have kids with autism, and we're training teachers on how to teach kids with autism. We're providing services for kids who have autism. The question is that money being spent wisely? To me, it was very impressive. Today it appeared that it is, but this is some over $4 million. We're in the process of trying to cut the budget. I would say to the Republicans in the Senate, I want to thank them for ending their 2-year boycott of involving themselves in the budgeting process, and I want to thank them for suggesting certain cuts and joining us in that process. I don't agree with all of their proposals. Some of them are unconstitutional. They violate court decrees and they violate contracts, but their proposal is to cut some $5 billion, where if we did that, we would just eviscerate so many state programs. So that's really what we're trying to do. We're going to try to see whether the money we spend on everything from, autism programs to battered women's shelters. We have to make sure that the money is being spent wisely.
Senator, we're getting into kind of the backstretch of the budget process as we're starting the month of April. To what degree is the leadership in the General Assembly under the gun to actually turn out a full line item budget as opposed to a lump sum partial budget?
The lump sum budget is the aberration. We only did that the last 2 years because the Republicans refused to vote for anything. And an unprecedented drop in revenues that had never happened before in the history of the United States collectively occurred the last 2 years. And so with only Democrats voting to cut dramatically the spending, we didn't have enough votes. So we said to the governor, this is all the money we have, Governor, you got to figure out where to spend it, which is not the best way to do it. We should prioritize. But we simply didn't have enough votes. Now, to their credit, this year the Republicans are involved both in the House and the Senate, supposedly. In the Senate, we'll find out soon, with actual line item appropriations, which is what we do. The legislature does not spend money. The legislature authorizes the governor to spend money, and that's what our responsibilities are. And so it's going to be tough because we still have to cut, as I said, and we'll see what the process is, and hopefully we'll be able to do it in a line item fashion.
The governor today called for some reform to workers' comp. Is that something that you expect to happen in the next few weeks? I mean, you hear from that a lot from business leaders and whatnot.
Yes, it's one of the most important things we can do this year. We have a horrible system for workers' comp. We have businesses which are paying much more than other states. It's the best thing we can do to improve the business climate. However, it's also extremely difficult. The people involved hospitals, doctors, unions, lawyers, and of course the business community themselves. And those folks have to sacrifice. And it's not a partisan issue. This is not something, as I said, there's no votes for any kind of workers' comp reform in both caucuses and in both chambers. So Senator Rodonio and I have spent a lot of time trying to put together a bill that we can pass. But with any kind of compromise, you can't ask for everything and expect to get everything. And this is not easy for Democrats to vote against doctors, hospitals, unions, and lawyers. So it's in order to benefit the Chamber of Commerce and the manufacturers. So we have to ask the Republicans to really put themselves in our shoes a little bit, realize that they're not going to get everything they want, and do a compromise. And that's something that the governor's office has attempted to do with their proposal.
What do you make of the governor's proposal?
We're going to review it. We might have some modifications. We have to also work with the House and make sure that they're for it as well. But again, this is not something which is just the Democrats versus Republicans. It's a bipartisan effort. We have to do something about it.
Is there a key provision in workers' comp reform that you think must be part of the final mix?
The fee schedule is the second highest fee schedule in the nation. We pay an enormous amount of money to doctors and hospitals specifically for medical implants that it just is unrivaled. And that's where we can save most of the money. And There's obviously some other things that we can do to make the system work. We definitely have to deal with the fraud that we apparently have been confronted with in our penitentiary. So that's something which we also have to include in these provisions.
Anyone else? Going once?
Anything going on with the, anything to do with the state payments to universities?
The state payments to universities, the state payments to units of local government, and to people that do business with the state. I put a bill in, Senate Bill 3, requires 3/5 vote. It would allow for us to make those payments over time and get everybody paid right away. If we don't pass that, if we don't restructure that debt, people will be, on September 1st, having to sue the state at the Court of Claims. And even then, after they get their judgment, come back to the legislature and say, now, how are you going to pay us? So we owe that money. It's not new borrowing. It's restructuring debt that we already have, and it's up to the Republicans to decide if they want to vote for it.
Dr. Bouchard, quickly, I spoke with you yesterday about the funding for the universities, the change in the ability to raise tuitions and performance-based funding and stuff like that. What did you speak with Senator Cullerton about today, and what was your main point? What did you tell him specifically about that idea?
Well, we've talked about these same issues. I think the senator understands that with respect to performance-based funding, we would like to start from where we are and move forward and be judged on that basis, as opposed to a one-size-fits-all kind of thing. We've discussed that, and certainly, you know, we're not trying to raise tuition inordinately, but you know, when you cut 7% this last year because we lost the federal stimulus monies, and when you're $140 million in arrears and getting paid up to date on your FY11 monies, that's a problem for us. And I know the senator is very aware of that, and has offered to support a program to consolidate the debts to try to get us all paid up in time, but I don't know how successful that's going to be. Senator?
Well, again, this is something which requires 3/5 vote. So we need to make sure that the public understands the connection between not paying your bills and what the consequences are. So there's teachers who have been what they call being riffed. They've received notices now that they're not going to be rehired in September. And it's only because we just haven't paid them the money we already owed them. And if people want to vote against a plan to restructure the debt so that those school districts get paid so those teachers don't have to be fired, we're going to give them that opportunity. But we need bipartisan support, and we haven't received it yet.